Now on Indianapolis This Week. Is Indiana facing a crisis dealing with a teacher shortage? The state school superintendent talks about new ways to keep teachers in the state and get new ones on the job. BMV fee issues and a new direction. A Sunday morning exclusive with the head of the agency, with his plan to restore confidence and trust with the public. And the meltdown in the House of Representatives. Who becomes the next Speaker of the House?
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. Now is the time to join us on Twitter as well. Follow @IndyThisWeek and join our conversation. We begin talking about the struggle to find teachers for some Hoosier classrooms. A blue ribbon panel appointed by State School Superintendent Glenda Ritz meeting this week about to wrap up its work. The group trying to find ways to keep Indiana's current teachers and bring new ones into Hoosier classrooms. Joining us now is the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Glenda Ritz. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
On the issue of teacher shortage, are we at a crisis mode right now in Indiana?
Well, I think we're in a mode to be proactive to make sure that we're not going to be in a total crisis mode. So we've seen a 30% drop in those initial licenses that we're actually issuing, and we've also seen a 30% drop in those entering the profession of education or prep programs.
And I'm wondering, what do you attribute that to? Is it the fact that you've become more accountable? Have you made it much harder to become a teacher, and so maybe those folks that are not fit to be in the classroom are just not coming into the profession?
Well, I think there are several phases that we're studying at the Blue Ribbon Commission, and so we're looking at recruitment and retention of teachers, both. And so some of the root causes that have come, public perception of being a teacher, and what does that entail? Also, there's been the topic of career earnings, and what does that entail for a teacher? We've also been discussing professional development and mentoring, and we've also been discussing the purpose of standardized testing in the role of a teacher. So there's been a lot of conversation about things that we might need to address.
And we know that without teachers, you and I would not have a job. So we're very thankful for our teachers. This commission, though, has already looked at some primary things, sort of the issue of mentoring, the issue of training, the issue of pay. This is not a funding year for the legislature, so how will you get them to understand that in January?
Well, I think many of the action items and the strategies that we have don't all take funding. Sometimes there's some legislative language that can be actually addressed that give locals more control in what they might do in terms of, let's just say, how they address the issue themselves locally and what it is they have parameters to work with in a variety of areas, whether it be professional development, whether it be compensation, whatever it might entail. So we've seen a lot of changes in a lot of different areas regarding the profession in the last several years, and so we just need to take a good look at it because now we're starting to see shortages. We've always had some shortages in particular areas, but now we're seeing, an actual overall drop in those entering the profession.
The Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma, said on Tuesday that the issue of teacher shortage would be a priority come January. Does that bolster whatever it is that you will propose to the legislature come January?
Oh, I'm very pleased that Brian Bosma wants to address the issue, and the special study session that they're going to have on October 19th. I welcome that as well, and the Blue Ribbon Commission will be doing a small report and an update about where we're going to be. The Commission's going to do its work, be finished by mid-December in time for whatever we might want to propose for legislative action, and really action strategies in general that may not even require legislative action.
The Commission does meet this upcoming Thursday. What are you hoping that they will have in place by January? What does that report look like in the sense of what do you want to deliver to the legislature? Will it be a binder? Will it be bullet points?
Well, I think we're going to give some background information and some actual statistics, and then I think there's going to be what I would call, here are the large areas that we feel action strategies need to take place, and then there's probably going to be some specific things that we really want to do, maybe even suggestions from the Department of Education about what language might need to be changed in law.
Is there something that you think has to be accomplished in 2016?
Well, actually, I am letting the Blue Ribbon Commission actually work with this whole matter. It's made up of a very diverse group of people, and Marianne Santos de Barona, the Purdue's Dean of Education, co-chairs it with me. And so we have a very eclectic group of educators, and we also have some legislators serving on the commission as well. So we hope to really fine-tune what we feel are some good strategies to make sure we retain and we recruit educators into our field.
Educators need to know, though, that this year, though, if something is going to cost money, you'll have to wait till 2017 because of the way the budget Indiana works.
Well aware of that, but the conversation needs to begin.
Right, but the educators need to know that you will be pushing that, but there will be no major ticket item coming out of this legislature in the sense if it costs money, especially pay. I mean, teachers want to get paid more money, as you know, because if you take a look at other jobs, they're usually not the highest paid people.
So the conversation has to begin now.
And so
I'm looking forward to that.
Ma'am, we thank you so much. We look forward to the Commission's work on Thursday. And I'm sure you'll come back and let us know what's going on as you deal with the issue and the state deals with the issue of teacher shortages.
Thank you.
Linda Riggs, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Please come back.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's change gears now and turn to the other big story of the week. The Commissioner of the BMV appearing before a State House committee on Thursday. The agency citing some major improvements to the agency, including more audits and how it's handling fee problems disclosed in an independent report back in May. Those fees not connected to the ongoing class action lawsuit in Marion County involving overcharges. We now welcome to the program the BMV's Commissioner Ken Abernathy. Welcome to the program. On this Sunday morning, let's talk about those 16 overcharges and undercharges that were released in the BKD report. Have those all been resolved?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Raphael. They are in process, as we testified before the committee. They'll be completed by the end of the year. I would give you this update that of the 16, 12 have been completed, and either credits or checks have been sent to the customers. Of the remaining 4, and by the way, of those one of those actually, as we determined later on when we got into it, found out there was not even an overcharge at all. Of the remaining 4, 3 of those we've actually now got to the point where we've determined who is affected, the actual customers that were affected, and so we're in a process of affecting those refunds. And the last one, we're determining exactly who was affected, and once that's complete, we will go through the process of doing those refunds.
Those folks that were undercharged, will you go back and ask them for a reimbursement?
No, and the governor at the press conference at my appointment in February pointed that out, that we would not go back and ask for money back.
You're going to stick to that then?
Yes. Yes, we are not going to go back, that the undercharges will not be recovered.
You have added, since you've come on board, some internal controls to avoid this from happening again. Can you give Hoosiers a sense of confidence that this will not happen again within the system?
Well, the thing we talked about was transformational change, and it really is transformational change. We put in practices and processes to be able to deal with these issues. Most notably, we put in a project management office. That's so we have a defined process to go through. When we identify an issue, we have a way to deal with it and to solve the issue. Secondly, we've put in an internal audit function. We're in a process of completing that now. That function will actually go around and evaluate. It will conduct audits, and it'll be an ongoing audit of the various parts of the agency. And the bigger thing is, I think, is just a cultural change within the staff to let them know, hey, we are all in this together. I would point out, as I did to the committee, we have required online training for our staff that by the end of the year, they'll all have completed white belt training in Lean Six Sigma training. So I think that's kind of...
You will be unable to make major changes without the help of the legislature. So come January, in this non-funding year, what will be your #1 priority to help with what you call this transformational change?
Well, and if you look at the BKD report, they talk about a complex, confusing, and contradictory code. So the biggest thing is simplifying, streamlining the code, the motor vehicle codes for the state of Indiana. And that involves a number of things, but a lot of it is making sure that, for example, we talk about how many ways you can register a vehicle, 190 ways to register a vehicle. The numbers are astronomical, the different combinations, so it's streamlining, simplifying that, putting it in a way that the Hoosiers will understand, and quite frankly, staff will understand.
Ken Abernathy, BMV Commissioner, we thank you for your time. Please come back again, and as you know, we'll keep an eye on what you're doing as you work to make the BMV much more leaner, stronger, and more effective for Hoosiers every day.
Thank you, Raphael. Appreciate it.
Coming up, it's called the Right to Farm Act, but is Indiana's law actually hurting some Hoosier farm families? The court case that could have a huge impact on rural communities. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back to Indianapolis this week as we turn to a new legal fight over Indiana's Right to Farm Act, a court case that's pitting rural farmers against large animal operations. For that, we now turn to our Jason Fechter. Jason?
Thank you, Raphael, and we want to thank Richard Himsel for being with us here this morning. Richard, thanks for coming in.
You're
from
welcome.
Danville, a retired farmer in Hendricks County there. Tell me about the farm that's been in your family for generations.
Well, my folks moved to the Danville area, to the farm that we now live on in the mid-30s, and raised a family there. I was raised there, spent all of my childhood time there. I was born and raised in the house that I do live in today that's in question, so it's not like we come in second. We've been there all of our lives.
You've been there. Tell me about the problems you've run into, though, over the past few years.
Well, about 1,600 feet southwest of my property, my home, some members of my family petitioned to put in a hog facility. So they built 2 gigantic animal barns, hog barns, that house about 4,000 head of hogs apiece. I assume that's what's in there. And you know, within 3 days after the buildings had been construction, after going through the proper channels, and they moved in hogs, and within 3 days we started smelling hogs, and with the prevailing wind out of the southwest blowing right at us, it was pretty strong.
And you, along with the Hoosier Environmental Council, now challenging Indiana's Right to Farm Act out there that protects farmers to be able to farm on their lands, but you say that they're overstepping that law.
I believe they're overstepping it because the ground was in row crops already being farmed. Now with the hogs, the whole community is kind of up in roar. I've kind of been the lead spokesman for the group. Unfortunately, the people that are being sued and maybe it's not unfortunate, but have the same name as I do. So, you know, I've kind of been to the forefront.
And what do you and your attorney want to see done now? What do you want to see happen next?
Well, what I'd like to see personally for myself is my property has been damaged to the point that realtors tell me it's worth $0. Nobody wants to live there. You know, I've lost the value of my property, which at one time was appraised at over $400,000. My wife and I, Janet and I, listed it this a couple years ago and couldn't even get a nibble. As soon as people found out that there was a hog barn there, and they were not interested at all.
Retired farmer Richard Himsel, thanks so much for being here with us.
You're
this
welcome.
morning.
Thank you, sir.
Richard. Raphael?
Jason, thank you. Coming up, Indiana House Republicans pick a new number 2 in charge, while Republicans in Washington scramble to find a new speaker. Our political insiders are ready to weigh in on both issues next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. Indiana House Republicans on Tuesday choosing their new majority floor leader. That vote could also give us our first real look at what may top the legislative work in January. State House reporter Katie Hines explains.
House Speaker Brian Bosma introduced the new majority floor leader who will replace Judd McMillan in the last week. Representative Matt Lehman, who's already in leadership, will take over the role of the second highest ranking Republican in the House. During Bosma's announcement, he weighed in on what he thinks will get done during the short legislative session beginning in January. He says the focus needs to be on the teacher shortage and transportation funding. He says he anticipates discussion on statewide protections for the LGBT community, but isn't committing to a hearing on a topic at this point. Democrats are already outlining their legislative strategy for the issue. Senate Democratic leader Tim Lannon unveiled a preliminary draft of legislation that outlines changes to the state's civil rights laws. His proposal would prohibit discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Raphael?
Katie, thank you so much. We now bring in our insiders, Mary Beth Schneider, Adam Kirsch, and Abdul Hakim Shabazz, the speaker, talking about infrastructure, highways. But he did not say that a priority would be the extension of civil rights to the LGBTQ community. Is he just pushing that along to the governor to carry that weight?
I don't think it's pushed along to the governor. I think there will be some discussions. I mean, Senate President David Long said that, their caucus would probably add something to the discussion as well. Like I said, but if you look at sort of the bigger picture and things that are more immediate, roads and teachers, what the Speaker said will be their two top priorities. He didn't say that they wouldn't address this, just said that the roads and teacher shortage will be the priority.
Well, Republicans put Hoosier hospitality in jeopardy last time with the RFRA law, and they can make a major step to fix that with full civil rights protections for the LGBT Hoosiers. It's 6 words and a comma. The Democrats are right on this one.
Maribeth, what do you make of this? Why not just say, look, it's a priority, we're going to deal with it, and then we're going to move on with the rest of the session?
Well, one, they hardly ever put a spotlight on the issue that becomes the issue of the session. I was thinking about the right to work. I don't remember that being listed as their top priority of the session that became all about right to work. We had what was called the education session not that long ago, and that wasn't really what everybody talked about all session long. It was RFRA. And so I think that Brian Bosma does not want to say that an ongoing civil rights discussion to fix the RFRA problem from the previous session is their priority, but it doesn't mean it won't come up. It'll have to come up. It'll get talked about.
And just real quick, as an attorney, I can tell you the quote-unquote RFRA fix is more than just 6 words and a comma. You have to have very specific definitions about what the terms of sexual orientation, gender identity mean. If you look at any state that has one of these statutes, they clearly define what those things are, and not every state has the exact same definition, so it's more than just 6 words and a comma.
The fact that Republicans are pushing for a so-called compromise on civil rights protections for all Hoosiers says all we need to know. I mean, we saw Governor Pence, who refused to say discrimination was wrong on a national interview last summer.
Let's talk about roads. The other issue was infrastructure, INDOT needing more money. Will INDOT get more money? Will the governor have to dip it into that rainy day fund and help out the issue with INDOT?
I think so, but and especially it seems like Brian Bosma putting roads right at the top tells the governor, I think, a huge message of what they want to focus on. So.
Well, I think it's anyone who had to drive to any point north of Lafayette in the last 6 months knows Indiana has a crumbling infrastructure that needs to be addressed. And quite frankly, I'm happy to see some Republicans talking about it because Pence has been denying it's a problem.
First of all, we've been talking about roads and infrastructure for a while. Anybody covered last session, everybody said that eventually, roads are going to have to be the big deal. The trick will be exactly how do they adjust the road funding formula, because you can't, it's a non-budgetary year, so you can't really tinker around with dollars per se, but you can readjust the road funding formula to make sure more money gets towards roads and infrastructure.
Let's hit the road and head to Washington, D.C. On Capitol Hill. Kevin McCarthy, the man expected to replace John Boehner as Speaker of the House, well, he stepped out of the race under apparent pressure from hardline conservatives. What is happening in the nation's capital? Maribeth.
Oh, I had just a blast following this last week, and I'm sure that just about every political reporter in Washington did. I cannot imagine this is very much fun, however, for the House Republicans who see, when they talk about disarray and chaos, they're the poster children right now. This is not good for them going into a presidential year, and it's even worse going into budget and debt ceiling fights. Who is driving the ship right now? I have absolutely no idea.
So will Paul Ryan be the guy? There's a lot of talk that Paul Ryan...
The name that I was hearing late Friday from some of my Republican friends out in Washington, D.C. was that Paul Ryan appears to be like the reluctant warrior. It's the person that he doesn't want it. He'd rather not do it. He loves being the chairman of Ways and Means, loves being the budgetary guy, but slowly and surely is being dragged into the speakership. I don't know if even Paul Ryan on board can fix the dysfunction of that so-called freedom, quote-unquote, Tea Party caucus. And to a certain degree, John Boehner is to blame for not putting the smackdown on these guys a long time when he should have, and actually act like a speaker to say, hey, I'll allow for people to have dissent, but we will not tolerate open rebellion.
But Mike Pence has to be kicking himself, right? Yeah. I don't think he would not be a reluctant candidate for speaker if he was still in Congress.
And in some alternate universe, he is speaker today. I mean, he would be a good candidate to solve this breach right now.
And it's funny because actually when they had the big Rolls-Royce announcement last week in Indianapolis, I kind of asked the governor, hey, do you regret you didn't stay in Congress, you could be speaker today? He just sort of politely smiled and laughed and immediately walked to his next
Adam, are Democrats celebrating this? Is this good for your party as they get ready for a presidential debate next week?
Quite frankly, there's probably some political benefit to Democrats, but it's more troubling that the Republican Party nationally has gotten itself to a point where I don't think it can effectively govern. I mean, I don't know how, when they can't settle on a speaker, we can have credible discussions on debt ceiling increases, continuing to fund the government. I don't know how we can get to a governing coalition as it currently stands, and that's troubling.
And I also want to point out that after all these months, we're now heading into the winter of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that,
they weren't even all of them kidding, you know, put Donald Trump in as speaker. There have been tweets about, and stories in the Hill about putting Newt Gingrich in as speaker.
Remember, you got to remember, there's no rule that says the speaker must be a member of the House. So you know what, I'll throw my hat in if that's what it takes to get these guys back together.
And to get you off the couch.
As long as I can come back and do Indianapolis this week.
I'll do your press.
There you go.
Final word?
None.
The conversation between our insiders continues, of course, on Twitter. That's where Mary Beth lives. Adam, Abdul, and the entire group to join the debate throughout the week. And, of course, while you're there, follow our official Twitter account at Indy This Week for news and updates every day of the week. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6.